On this Thursday night, politics and tariffs. How the U.S. threat appears to be boosting liberal fortunes. How President Trump's plan to take over Gaza is playing out.
This is the first good idea that I've heard.
The legal realities and how Gazans are reacting. Emergency in Santorini, the Greek island's seismic crisis and rush to escape. Plus, to serve, protect, and create.
It was kind of my way to express my passion.
The art of healing soldiers and veterans.
Global National with Donna Friesen.
Good evening and thanks for joining us. The federal government, along with Canada's premiers, are striving to find ways to mitigate U.S. tariffs that could be imposed next month, and at the same time try to convince the U.S. president not to impose them.
We're not out of the woods yet, because we don't just want to get through this challenging moment. We want to emerge from it stronger than ever before.
Prime Minister Justin Trudeau made those remarks while meeting with Canada's mayors. As Mackenzie Gray reports, the looming threat from President Trump appears to be having one unintended consequence. It's boosting the popularity of the federal Liberals.
It's all that anyone seems to be talking about.
When our backs are up against the wall, we will all stand together for Canada. We will choose Canada.
A renewed sense of patriotism and urgency to handle the potential 25% tariffs from U.S. President Donald Trump. And a key part of combating that will be announced shortly.
By the end of this week, we will have the terms of reference for this fentanyl czar finalized.
But it's not just the new czar. The $1.5 billion border plan the Liberals sold Trump on might be enough to get out from any future tariffs, according to the defense minister.
If we are able to demonstrate that those investments are producing real results for both of our countries, we may be able to avoid a return to the discussion with respect to tariffs.
The Liberal strategy of being laser focused on dealing with Trump seems to be giving the government new life. Polling from Ipsos exclusively for Global News still projects a Conservative majority government, but the gap is shrinking. The Liberals are up 8 points since January, now down 13% to the Conservatives nationally.
Most people who are into politics were looking at what was going to happen in the next election as being a fairly sure thing for Pierre Poilievre and the Conservatives. I don't know that these numbers suggest it's as sure as it was before.
Political shifts also showing in Quebec, where the Liberals are now tied with the Bloc Québécois in a léger poll at 29%. That jumps to 38% for the Liberals if Mark Carney takes over from Justin Trudeau, which would be a higher vote share than they got back in 2015.
The Liberal brand was pretty much damaged before Christmas, and now all of a sudden there's a lot of attention on the Liberal Party or the Liberal brand.
The tariff threat also having Quebecers rethinking oil and gas, with 75% of them now willing to have a pipeline run through their province, a moment the Natural Resources Minister believes could open the door for potential new infrastructure.
It is a conversation about how do we ensure that we actually can be energy secure.
Jonathan Wilkinson told reporters he thinks the ballot question in the next election has shifted from the Liberals' past record in the carbon tax to who can best handle Donald Trump, Donna. An open political question that could upend this year's vote.
Okay, Mackenzie Gray in Ottawa, thanks. President Trump's nominee to be America's chief trade negotiator is promising to stick to Trump's protectionist approach. At his Senate confirmation hearing today, Jamieson Greer said the tariffs imposed on China this week, along with those threatening Canada and Mexico, are about curbing fentanyl trafficking. He did say a universal tariff needs further study to gauge its impact on the U.S. trade deficit.
I am convinced that we have a relatively short window of time to restructure the international trading system to better serve U.S. interests.
Canadian business owners can't afford to be complacent. Nova Scotia's government has set up a tariff hotline to help companies handle what could be coming and to help explore new markets. Heidi Petrachik spoke with some business owners who are looking for new strategies.
Nerve-wracking. Everybody's trying to figure out what's truly going on.
That's what it's like for business owners trying to navigate the ongoing threat of U.S. tariffs on Canadian products, like the frozen seafood Chris Richards sends to his American customers. His focus now is getting the product across the border before March.
We're just trying to beat those deadlines by moving our inventory, our frozen inventory, into the U.S., into cold storages there.
Canada sends almost $5 billion worth of seafood stateside. Trade tensions with U.S. President Donald Trump mean the industry is under pressure to quickly find new customers.
It'll be difficult. There's nothing like the U.S. market for fish and seafood from Canada, but we can't be reliant on a market that is so unpredictable.
You have to sort of carry on But I think some degree of planning and thought as to what will be done if these tariffs are implemented is probably a good idea.
Some industries are using this time to head south of the border to meet with American politicians and business leaders to try to stop the tariffs in their tracks. Representatives with the forestry industry are making their case in Washington this week.
There's a lot of states that depend on our products. We need to talk to those legislators about how this is a tax on Americans. And this is going to be won by Americans saying we don't want this.
At the same time, union leaders representing tens of thousands of workers in auto and steel production are pushing governments on this side of the border to go big with the Buy Canada movement.
Requiring the use of Canadian-made steel and Canadian-made products more broadly. Through the infrastructure.
And using our own procurement dollars to put Canadians to work, boldly saying we are going to make in Canada and build in Canada.
Business owners and industries working with their eyes on the calendar, waiting for Trump's next move. Heidi Petracek, Global News, Halifax.
President Trump today restated his vision that the U.S. will take ownership of Gaza, defying U.S. allies and adversaries around the world who have condemned the idea. After hinting yesterday that U.S. troops could be involved, today Trump said Israel would hand over Gaza to the U.S. once the fighting ends. Israel has no legal right to hand it over, nor does the U.S. have any legal right to own Gaza. At a prayer breakfast this morning, Trump claimed a light is shining on the world now that he's back in office.
In that end, I hope my greatest legacy, when it's all finished, will be known as a peacemaker and a unifier. I hope that's going to be true.
Trump also vowed to create a White House faith office and root out what he calls anti-Christian bias in the United States. Israel's defense minister is in lockstep with Trump. He has instructed Israel's army to prepare a plan for the voluntary departure of Palestinians from Gaza, saying countries like Spain, Ireland, Norway should take them, and that Canada could take Palestinians too. Canada's Foreign Affairs Minister quickly responded on social media, saying we support Palestinians' right to self-determination, including from being forcibly displaced from Gaza. Redmond Shannon reports.
The aftermath of a heavy rainstorm in Gaza City. Its exhausted residents living in tents and under tarps. Look at the children walking under rain and in mud. This is not a life, says this man. But most Gazans insist they want to stay, wary of another possible chapter in their history of forced displacement. On Thursday, Donald Trump doubled down on his hugely controversial plan for Gaza, posting online that Gazans be resettled in the region and that Gaza would be turned over to the United States by Israel at the conclusion of fighting. Trump said U.S. troops would not be needed for that. He did not say whether Gazans would be allowed back. Others in his administration again tried to clarify.
In order to fix a place like that, people are going to have to live somewhere else in the interim.
It's a remarkable idea, and I think it should be really pursued.
With Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu still in Washington, his defense minister said Israeli troops should get ready for people to leave Gaza and that residents should be free to do so. Israel has blocked most people from exiting the Strip for almost 2 decades. Legal experts say Gaza is not Israel's land to hand over, and forcing anyone to move is against international law.
The risk is that this would send a message that great powers, that states do not need to take international law very seriously.
And Trump seemed to promote that idea even further Thursday. The US president is now sanctioning individuals who assist the International Criminal Court in its actions targeting the US and Israel. Donna?
Redmond Shannon in London, thanks. A judge has intervened in the Trump administration's plan to get tens of thousands of U.S. federal workers to leave their jobs. They had until midnight to accept a buyout, but a federal judge has now temporarily blocked that. Trump has given billionaire Elon Musk the sweeping authority to decide what to cut. And as Reggie Cicchini reports, if Musk gets his way, it could gut multiple federal agencies.
Elon Musk has got to go!
There's an unprecedented shift happening inside the U.S. government as the elected president of the United States seemingly cedes power to a so-called special government employee who happens to be the wealthiest man on earth.
Is what is happening a takeover by an unelected billionaire?
Elon Musk's influence has become a point of contention and in many cases distress across the American bureaucratic workforce as he pushes to reduce the number of jobs that exist. Expendable positions in the eyes of his boss.
It could be a lot, it could be a little, we don't know, but we'd love to have them leave.
There is no agency that appears to be safe, including at the CIA, where the entire organization could be wiped off the payroll, reducing the number of skilled employees who support key U.S. institutions and everyday Americans.
It's happening in this zone that we could best describe as a gray legal zone.
A deadline to accept this so-called buyout plan was moved from Thursday to February 10th, with 3 unions representing 800,000 employees saying the offer was rushed and largely mimics a plan Musk carried out at Twitter in 2022.
If you resign from your job, you pretty much don't have any rights.
There's uncertainty for those who've already resigned. Pay and benefits are supposed to continue through September unless the government changes its approach.
Even the president doesn't have the power to do this. This is really something that requires congressional permission.
Lost in the bluster after administrations change over is the seamless continuity of government, typically carried out by rank-and-file employees, who are now having their competency questioned and loyalty tested.
At some point, members in both political parties need to stand up for their institution. And I don't see that happening today, and I hope it does over the coming weeks and months.
Mass layoffs could come for those who don't volunteer, leaving agencies left to be shaped by the new administration's whims. Reggie Cicchini, Global News, Washington.
Some dairy cattle in the U.S. have tested positive for a strain of bird flu not previously detected in cows. The strain was detected in 6 dairy herds in Nevada. Sequencing of milk identified it as the D1.1 genotype. It's been found in wild birds and poultry, and it's the same strain identified in a BC teenager who became seriously ill last fall. She has since been discharged from hospital, but it's unclear how she became infected. A different bird flu strain has spread to over 950 cattle herds across 16 U.S. states. Scientists say detection of this second strain reveals how little is known about how the virus is spreading in cows. More stores are about to vanish from Canada's retail landscape. Find out which ones coming up. Plus, Santorini's state of emergency. Canada Post has laid off dozens of managers. Almost 50 non-unionized management staff were let go earlier this week as part of a widespread restructuring. Last month, 20% of Canada Post senior executive roles were eliminated. The Postal Service says the job losses will not impact service to Canadians. Earlier this year, the federal government provided more than $1 billion to help the Crown Corporation stay afloat. 2024 ended with a month-long strike by unionized workers. Canada Post has been running annual losses since 2018, totaling over $3 billion. Quicksilver, Billabong and Volcom are closing all their stores in Canada and the U.S. Liberated Brands, the company behind the once popular surfer and skateboard-inspired labels, has filed for bankruptcy in the U.S. 120 stores will close, along with the company's international headquarters. About 1,400 employees have been laid off. The CEO blames the rise of fast fashion brands as well as high interest rates and inflation. The Greek government has now declared a state of emergency on the island of Santorini after days of consecutive small earthquakes. A more powerful one, a magnitude 5.2 quake, happened last night and triggered the emergency. There's been no major damage, but there have been small landslides on the cliffs beneath the island's whitewashed homes. Declaring an emergency allows quicker repairs and helps streamline evacuations. 11,000 residents and workers have already left Santorini as authorities prepare in case a larger earthquake hits. There have been nearly 24 tremors of magnitude 4 or greater in the last 24 hours. Santorini is on top of a dormant volcano that last erupted in the 1950s, though experts say this latest cluster is unrelated to volcanic activity. Gaza, Greenland, the Panama Canal, and Canada. A former advisor to Donald Trump explains why Trump has his eye on the Arctic. This deer in Kamloops, BC, got a helping hand from firefighters. It was stranded on a frozen river, unable to cross the icy surface. So crews put their ice rescue training to good use, helping the young deer slide to shore. It soon found its footing and was able to walk away. From coast to coast to coast, Canadians are locked in sub-zero temperatures tonight. That is not entirely unusual for winter, of course, but it has been rare this season. In fact, last month was the warmest January on record globally. That's according to the Copernicus Climate Change Service. Northeast and northwest Canada were particularly warm. The Arctic is warming faster than the rest of the world, and that is having big implications for climate change and geopolitical fights. Russia and China have long eyed Canada's Arctic region, and now U.S. President Donald Trump talks about Canada becoming the 51st state. Global News spoke with former Trump advisor Steve Bannon, who warns the Arctic could be central in helping Trump establish what he calls hemispheric control. Eric Sorensen weighs the reality of that threat.
I would love to see Canada be the 51st state. You get rid of that artificially drawn line.
U.S. President Trump's repeated interest in absorbing Canada is a non-starter for Canadians. But could Trump have something else in mind? The Arctic, the frozen expanse that long separated us from adversaries.
Canada's greatest defense is about to become your softest underbelly. The north of Canada, that open border.
Steve Bannon, a one-time confidant of Donald Trump, says he understands the president's thinking. North America's security is threatened as climate change opens up the Arctic, and Bannon says Canada is in no position to defend itself.
China and Russia, the great powers, and the United States, fighting it out over the Arctic. With the vast resources of the Arctic is going to be the new great game of the 21st century. Canada, you are thrust into the middle of that.
President Trump is clearly focused on the Arctic. He says acquiring Greenland is an absolute necessity for international security. And Canada's presence in the north is small. There are many large Canadian Arctic islands. Only half a dozen are populated. Most are uninhabited. But the threat from Russia and China may be less about land and more about the water, access to the Northwest Passage and economic development in the Arctic Ocean, and about the airspace above, the nuclear threat over the North Pole. Russia and China conducted joint air patrols in the Arctic last summer, and the West has fallen behind Russia's presence in the Arctic, which has reopened old military bases and developed new hypersonic missiles.
And that's what makes the Arctic such a dangerous area, that we have to ensure that we are, as much as possible, aligned with the Americans, despite the Americans, and we are doing everything necessary, which we haven't been, in ensuring that nuclear deterrence is, in fact, maintained.
Former Prime Minister Stephen Harper regularly traveled to the Arctic to demonstrate Canadian sovereignty, and Canada has stepped up work with NATO to increase Arctic security. But Canada's footprint in the north is spread thin. A military base at Alert on Ellesmere Island, some Arctic patrols, and our military partnership with the Americans in NORAD. Trump is angry that Canada is underspending on its NATO commitments and is bound to exert more pressure.
Internal logic is going to drive you that somehow we have to figure out how to partner with the United States.
Canadians bristle at the thought of Donald Trump running roughshod over Canadian sovereignty, but the North is a strategic target, and Canada is not an Arctic power on its own. Eric Sorensen, Global News, Toronto.
The power of art next, how it's helping some Canadian veterans heal. That song never gets old. Today would have been the 80th birthday of reggae legend Bob Marley. And to celebrate, his estate has organized a series of events, including live streaming a worldwide sing-along, so fans everywhere can join in. Marley died of cancer in 1981 at the age of 36. Many veterans carry physical and emotional tolls from their time spent serving the country. Supporting their mental health is what inspired the creation of a nonprofit art therapy program for active and retired Canadian soldiers. Krista Dow looks at how many veterans are using art to express themselves and heal.
To me, it's so important to, through the canvas, to be able to tell the story.
For Roger Chabot, every painting he creates connects to a memory of his past life, one of service.
Or sacrifice yourself for the country.
Chabot was an infantry sergeant and retired in 2016 after 32 years. He signed up at just 21 years old with the Royal 22nd Regiment, the Vandus, later rebranding to the Princess Patricia's Canadian Light Infantry in 1994. For him, the trauma of being a soldier and the transition to civilian life was a struggle. And it was through art, he says, he was able to overcome it.
Every time you're deployed somewhere, you never come back the same person. And for me, it was a way to relive some things, kind of a therapy. And I merged the two passions together. So for me, it was a way to express myself.
That passion, a common thread for many veterans, including Chris Henneberry, who's still active in the military, and says the two are not so different from one another.
When you start out in the military, it's very frightening, because you're going from the comfort of your own young life into a life that is the unknown, and that takes a lot of courage. It's really no different when you're doing art. It's the same sort of passion, the same sort of taking chances and commitment to, having an outcome.
That commitment now culminating in more than 100 pieces from 20 artists at Vancouver's Veterans Art Show and Exhibition, showing support for members of the Canadian Armed Forces, active and retired, ahead of the Invictus Games set to open here this weekend.
And that's my new concept now.
The hope is pieces like The Valley of Shadows, which honors our fallen soldiers, will resonate with Canadians and those who travel here to compete.
It's the country before self. And that's what it's about. And these people, my friends, gave their life for that. And that was my way of giving back.
Showcasing the art of war and the inspiration in sacrifice. Krista Dow, Global News, Vancouver.
That is Global National for this Thursday. I'm Donna Friesen. Tonight's Your Canada is Norris Point, Newfoundland and Labrador. We'd love to see your Canada. Please email it to globalnational@globalnews.ca. And thanks for watching. Jeff Semple will be at the anchor desk tomorrow, and I will see you again next week. Bye-bye.